Fantastic. So this is not a video interview, because if it is, I could, fix my hair and turn the lights on.
You're beautiful. It is a
Right.
interview. It is a video interview. I will record it. But
it is? All
yes.
right, I'll see if I no, it doesn't matter. All the lights, this is the best we can do, so it'll be fine.
Great. It's great.
All right, great. Some very strange reason as a child, my mental canvas was the world's biggest problems instead of like, I don't know, lunch. So I really don't quite know why that was in many ways, but that's been true of me from the very beginning. Yeah, when I was a kid, I kind of fell into this strange path. It was sort of late Cold War, and there were these kids who were kind of ambassadors for peace. And I kind of became one of those kids, and I went around to all sorts of international conferences, and I met with Nobel Prize winners and heads of state, and I had this kind of agenda, of change that I was kind of trying to implement. It was very ambitious. It was quite funny. I mean, in this video, in this like little clip, it was like me going, well, there's third world debt, there's demilitarization. There's, there's like, environmental degradation. So I'm going through a list of all of the big problems. And, I have certain ideas around those things. And so it was a funny life. And so when I was growing up in Australia, I was in the media a lot doing that kind of thing. And people didn't know what to make of me. I was such a funny kid. And, I would meet with the foreign minister or the prime minister, and I would pitch my ideas. And I still remember in 1990, and I was about 12 at the time, and I just had a meeting with the foreign minister, and there was a press conference after where at 12 I'm like, I'm very disappointed with the minister, It's like, and I look back on those days, I'm like, where did I get the kind of self-possession to do that, So the funny thing about my life is the sense that the through line is so striking. In a way, right? The same things I was doing and concerned about when I was 8 or 10 or 12 are still the things that I'm kind of working on today in many ways. And lots of things about me haven't changed. Like, I've still got the same politics and basic values. I probably, don't have, my idealism has been somewhat tempered by reality and the years, but not so tempered as to stop me from doing the sorts of stuff that I'm doing. Purpose is really a home for launching new social movements and new initiatives that are at the intersection of like mass participation and changing important problems. So we look around the world for issues that need this kind of movement. Before starting Purpose, I co-founded a group called Heimans, which is a global political community with 15 million members, and now Purpose takes issues like gay rights, global poverty, money in politics, civic participation in places like Brazil, cancer, nuclear weapons, major issues, and we look for ways where we can do mass mobilization around those issues using technology that actually moves the needle on those issues, and that creates often a sense of kind of global connectedness and solidarity across geographies around those issues, although some of our movements and some of our work is nationally specific. Give a few examples. I mean, one is Get Up, which is a group I started back in Australia, and where I'm from. And Get Up was a pretty interesting intervention where basically we had this guy, John Howard, who'd been Prime Minister for 10 years. There was no organised opposition to him, and we started an organisation that effectively became the opposition movement and became the alternative, the progressive alternative. And we organised a huge number of Australians, and Get Up today has more members than all of the political parties combined. And we helped to change the constitution. We actually had the High Court find it implied right to vote. We shifted or played an important role in the outcome of the last 2 national elections in Australia. And we also won a lot of landmark legislation around refugee rights, around climate change, and many other issues. So that's an example. Recently, you might cite the example of All Out, which is a global gay rights organisation that we started about a year ago, a little over a year ago. Now got 1 million members all over the world. We helped, won a bunch of victories. We helped to stop a bill in Uganda that would have made being gay subject to the death penalty, laws in the Ukraine that ban gay speech of any kind, and if you can believe it, we even brought about policy change in Sweden, where there was a law on the books that made it compulsory for transgender people to be sterilized if they wanted a sex change operation, which we thought was pretty ridiculous. And so we organised a big international campaign around this at All Out, and the key party that was blocking the change to the law changed their position. And so those are just small examples of the work that we do every day, but really it's about organising people around important stuff, really combining people's power and sense of their own agency. So what we do is really about organising collective power, and often we popularise issues which might be a bit obscure or difficult to understand. We make them both digestible and actionable. I mean, look, I think the Arab Spring is part of a bigger trend, which is incredibly exciting, which is that you know, the in the part of the world that was previously largely silent at the international level, the citizens of those countries, it could be the anti-corruption movements of India or of Brazil, it could be the democracy movements in the Arab world, particularly the emerging middle classes of those countries are becoming incredibly powerful, and they're finding ways to combine their voices in very exciting ways. So, you know, when we started Avaz, for example, which is this global movement that we started around a whole bunch of issues, you know, it was mainly Americans, Europeans, you know, people like me from Australia. And today, you know, there are millions of people in India, in Brazil, in these countries. And so part of what that means is the old division between, you know, victim and oppressor is really starting to dissolve, which is exciting. So, you know, to give you an example of global poverty, you know, in the 80s and 90s, it was all about Bob Geldof saving these voiceless Africans who were sort of crying on our television screens. But in 2012, if you want to change the rules of the game, you organise Africans using their mobile phones. And so there's something, you know, and those people organise themselves. So that's the exciting thing that we're seeing in the world. One of a number of exciting trends, but that's something that I'm personally hugely excited about. I think there's a lot of lessons about how you build these 21st century movements, which actually apply quite broadly. And I mean, the first thing I'd say is, you know, we have this concept of the movement entrepreneur, which is somebody who effectively doesn't need, in the 20th century, if you wanted to make big change in any context, you needed to have a lot of resource, you needed to have a lot of existing institutional power. But now, like, you know, if I think about what we did with GetUp, you know, I was a 26-year-old, you know, 27-year-old, and we were able to make a huge disruptive impact, not with a lot of money, but with a clever, skillful use of technology and storytelling, and really taking participation by people seriously. So one lesson is, you know, don't always look to the institutions to make big change. In fact, institutions are often highly constraining. And the temptation to work your way up P&G, well, maybe the most important way that you can do that is to actually go and create an innovation team or something that's protected from some of the institutional or organizational pathologies. So I think like this sense of valuing autonomy over and valuing this sort of inside-out relationship with big institutions is where a lot of the value is being created in the world today. And that's something I've learned from my own work. I mean, you know, I've worked with and for big institutions. I mean, I worked at McKinsey, and I went to lots of fancy universities and all that rubbish. But at the end of the day, like, I chose in my life to adopt a more autonomous path where, you know, there isn't like a promotion waiting for me every 6 months, or, you know, I have to kind of judge how my life goes according to rules that are much less clear and transparent and organized. But I think there's a real, that's enabled me to do things that are perhaps much more valuable in the world than I would have done if I'd adopted a more conventional path. So I think that's one interesting lesson. The second lesson, you know, I think valuing participation, you know, not pretending to value it by having a Facebook page, you know, and kind of, you know, to cheerfully tell them that their customer service experience, you know, I'm sorry you felt that way. I mean, it's sort of, you know, really actually thinking about what you can get from taking your base of participants seriously. and treating them like intelligent human beings, right? And I think there's real value in that. And so, moving past the rhetoric, and so if you're a middle manager at P&G, what could you really get if you engaged your consumers in shifting? Like if you're trying to shift your sustainability practices, bring them in on that. And get those people to actually be protagonists, not just receive, your ads telling them that you've done this good thing in the world. So there's a different mindset there. And, I think that's a lot of what our work is about. It's about enabling the power of participation. By far and away, to me, the biggest issue at the moment is climate change. That may be a boring, obvious answer, but I think objectively it's just the biggest looming crisis that the world faces. And, because of the slow-burning nature of the problem, it doesn't present itself in ways that tap our kind of primitive fight-flight instincts. And so it's leading to this massive collective action problem where we're avoiding this very significant coming train that's headed in exactly that direction. So I think one of the big adaptive challenges for the world is how do we figure out how to trick ourselves into actually recognizing the urgency of this problem, And at the same time, there's lots of people who are spending billions of dollars actually trying to deceive and confuse on this issue and, demonizing clean energy and demonizing climate change. So I think that's a huge challenge because, I think we'll look back at 100 years and we'll say, what the fuck happened? Excuse my language. But, we will look back and we'll be like, how did we miss this? And it's happening right now. So, if that makes me sound a bit too much like Al Gore, I apologize. But I think that's for me the number one issue. There's lots of others, but that's an important one. And I'll give you one more that we're working on at the moment, which is we need to be more attentive to the underlying systemic and structural stuff. So a great example of this is the US political system and the corrupting influence of money in that system and the way that distorts everything. So we're all off in our corners working on our issues. Whatever side of politics you're on, right? Everybody's working on their issue. And we sort of we ignore the root that is driving so many of the perverse outcomes. So if people are working on climate change and they're devoting their lives to campaigning and to advocacy and to policy and to all the other things, but they're missing the fact that because of the way the system is constructed, people can buy outcomes that distort all of those efforts. So I would urge everybody to be, as Lawrence Lessig says, root strikers, and to really focus more on those underlying problems, which is obviously something we're working on at Purpose. We just launched Unpack, which is our movement around this issue, but it's something that I kind of personally care deeply about and wish people were more focused on that, because if we put even 10% of the energy we put into those issues, into those foundational problems, we might actually be in a better place.